We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 53b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a brisa that if you have Meiser Sheni where there's no other solution, essentially it's not a Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin, so then it's Batal Barov. And one of the cases that the brisa gave is, let's say the Meiser Sheni entered Yerushalayim and then it left Yerushalayim, and that's considered Meiser Sheni with no solution. And so the Gemara asked, why is there no solution? Why can't you just bring it back into Yerushalayim and then you could eat it in Yerushalayim? Again, let's say it left Yerushalayim and got into a mixture. Why can't you just bring the whole mixture back into Yerushalayim and eat it in Yerushalayim? And the Gemara said, well, it became Tameh. But the Gemara said, well, even if it became Tameh, you should be able to redeem it, because the halach is you can redeem Meiser Sheni that's Tameh afilu b'Yerushalayim. You can actually redeem it even in Yerushalayim. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, lo suchal se'eso, it says that you can't. Now the simple explanation is you can't bring it. It's so much Meiser Sheni, you can't bring it all to Yerushalayim, so you redeem it on a coin. However, we understand that to mean ve'ein se'es el achila. That se'es means even if you just can't eat it, like in this case where it's Tameh, so you can't eat it, so actually you would be able to redeem it. So again, why is there no solution? You have this Meiser Sheni that was Tameh that got mixed into a mixture. Why do you say it's Batal Barov? Instead, you should just redeem it, because again, since it's Tameh, you could redeem it even inside Yerushalayim. And the Gemara says that the way that we know Se'es refers to Achila is that's how it's used in another context. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayisa Masos Me'es Panav. It says Vayisa Masos Me'es Panav, and that's talking about Achila, that's talking about food. And so therefore over here also, that's what it's talking about. And Rashi explains, V'afilu b'Yerushalayim, even in Yerushalayim, she'ein meiser tar nifta sham. Now you can't redeem pure meiser in Yerushalayim. Techsiv, as it's written, ki yirchak mimcha v'nasata b'kesef, it says that it's distant from you that you redeem it. V'lo kishahayu b'Yerushalayim, not that it's in Yerushalayim, but again, when you're talking about meiser sheni that's tameh, you are able to redeem it inside Yerushalayim. And so again, why is there no solution over here? And so the Gemara answers, Ela rather below koach bekesef meiser sheni. What we're talking about is you're not talking about the meiser sheni itself. You're talking about the food that was bought from the money of meiser sheni. Rashi explains, below koach meiser zeh velohu atzmo haya meiser. This wasn't itself meiser. What happened was he went to Yerushalayim. He had money of meiser sheni, and he used that to buy food in Yerushalayim. Ela tzarchi suda shalakach Yerushalayim bekesef meiser. What he had done was, again, he bought this food in Yerushalayim with the money of meiser sheni, and then it left Yerushalayim, and then it was brought back into Yerushalayim. So that is the situation. But the Gemara asks, well, even if that's the case, there's still the same solution. Lakoach bekesef meiser nami lifrei. If you have, let's say, food that was brought with the money of meiser sheni, that also can be redeemed. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, halakoach bekesef meiser sheni shenitma. If you have food that was bought with the money of meiser sheni, becomes tameh yifta, so it's allowed to be redeemed. And so therefore, again, we're back to the same question. You still have a solution. And the Gemara says to that, no, you don't have a solution according to everybody. Ki Rabbi Yehuda Damar you cover, because we're following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and he says that actually it cannot be redeemed in such a case. It has to be buried. Rashi says he covered, it has to be buried to kasavar, because Rabbi Yehuda holds lo olim. It's not strong enough lemitzvas pedyono to grab on, so to speak, to its redemption. And therefore, if we're following Rabbi Yehuda, so that's exactly the case over here. You have this food that was bought with the money of meiser sheni. It left Yerushalayim. It got into a mixture, became tameh. There's really no solution with this food. And the Gemara continues and asks, Rabbi Yehuda, but if we're following Rabbi Yehuda, why do we have to say that the Meiser Sheni left Yerushalayim? Afilu lo yotza nami, the same exact halacha would be true even if it didn't leave Yerushalayim. In other words, if you have the food that was bought with kesef Meiser Sheni, it became tameh, there is no solution. You can't redeem it according to Rabbi Yehuda, and of course you can't eat it. And so just say that's the situation. You don't have to talk about the fact that it left Yerushalayim. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather liolam bitar, rather we're talking about Meiser Sheni that is pure. And Rashi explains, Ela liolam bitar, really we're talking about Meiser Sheni that is pure. Bein Meiser, bein lekoach. We could be talking about regular Meiser Sheni that's pure. We could be talking about the food that's bought with kesef Meiser Sheni. Now the question is that if it left Yerushalayim, why not just bring it right back into Yerushalayim and eat it? And so to that, the Gemara answers, Umay yotza, what does it mean that it left Yerushalayim? What it actually means is, the nafal mechitzas, that the walls of Yerushalayim fell. And Rashi explains, Ma yotza nami dekamar, what does it mean that it left Yerushalayim? The nafal mechitzas chomas Yerushalayim, the walls of Yerushalayim fell. Veshuv ein meiser nechol sham, and the halach is you can't eat meiser sheni then anymore there. Ad sheyamdu mechitzas, until the mechitzas are rebuilt. Deba'inan lifnei Hashem tochlenu, that's what it says in the pasuk. Uvifdiya nami, now also what about redemption? Maybe redemption is a solution. That's not a solution. Uvifdiya nami lo, you also can't redeem it. The kol tu mechitzas milafdoso od mishanichnas l'socha, because once it enters Yerushalayim, it's no longer allowed to be redeemed at that point. And so therefore, even if you were to take it out of Yerushalayim, in this case, even if the walls were to fall, you would not be able to redeem it. And so therefore, again, you have no real solutions in this situation. And the Gemara continues, but is that really true? V'amar Rava. But didn't Rava say, mechitza lechol d'oraisa, that in terms of eating it, you have to have a mechitza, that's a d'oraisa halacha. But mechitzos liklo d'rabbanan, but the idea that once it's in the mechitzos it can't be redeemed, that's really only a d'rabbanan halacha. V'chi gazu rabbanan, and the rabbanan only made that gezerah, ki isnu lemechitzos, when the walls are there. In other words, they said that if it goes within the walls and then comes outside of the city, so the rabbanan say that it can't be redeemed. But ki lesnu lemechitzos lo gazu rabbanan, but if there's no walls at all, the Rabbanan didn't make such a gezerah, and so therefore redemption actually should be a viable option. And the Gemara says to that it's not true. Lo plug Rabbanan bein isnu lemechitzas, bein lesnu lemechitzas. The Rabbanan did not make a distinction between when the walls are there or not. It doesn't matter. Once it enters the walls, at that point in time, it's called tuhu mechitzas. It can't be redeemed. Even if the walls fall down, it cannot be redeemed. And Rashi explains, V'amar Rava b'Meseches Makos, but Rava said in Meseches Makos, Mechitza lechol d'oraisa, Mechitza liklo d'Rabbanan, Mechitza shenemra b'Torah, meaning when it says Mechitza in the Torah, Lo huzkara ela lechol b'socha, that's talking about eating within the walls of Yerushalayim. V'sha'amru b'Mishnah Mechitzos koltos, and when it says in the Mishnah that the Mechitzos, once it goes within the Mechitzos, koltos osam, miliftos od, at that point in time it can't be redeemed anymore. Imiyotza, if it leaves the walls, d'Rabbanan, that's just a d'Rabbanan halacha, once it comes within the mechitzos, so if it leaves, it can't be redeemed. Now Rashi explains, Lav Rava Kamarla, this line over here, that we should make a distinction when there are walls and when there are no walls, that's not Rava talking. Elahamaksha Kamar, that's actually the questioner in the Gemara that's saying, Mida Amar Rava Klitas Mechitzos Midrabanan Bialmi, from the fact that Rava said that the mechitzos are only Drabanan in terms of redemption. Vahashta Denafel Mechitzos Less Ali Gezerah. So now that there are no walls, that Gezerah shouldn't apply. Because the Rabbanan made a gezerah if the walls are there. And this guy takes the Meiser Sheni outside of the wall, so then the Rabbanan say you can't redeem. But let's say there's no walls at all, there should be no gezerah. Therefore that should be an option to redeem it. So why is it batul? And the Gemara answered to that, Umeshani. So the Gemara answered, Lo plug Rabbanan, the Rabbanan don't make a distinction. Bein Yotze mitochon, the naflu, it doesn't matter if it leaves or if it falls. Teklitas mechitzos gazru bestam, bein isnu, bein lesnu, because they say that the idea that once it's within the mechitzos, it's too late to redeem it, that is true whether the walls are there or whether the walls are not there. And the Gemara continues, Rav Huna bar Yehuda Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Huna bar Yehuda says that Rav Sheshes says, Chada Katani. The way to understand the Brisa is it's actually all one case. It's not two separate cases in the Brisa. What the Brisa means is Meiser Sheni she'ein bo shava pruta. You have Meiser Sheni that's not a pruta, shenichnas li Yerushalayim v'yotza, that entered Yerushalayim and then it left Yerushalayim. That's a situation where there's no matirin, there's no solution. It's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin, and that's why it's batul. And Rashi explains, Rav Huna bar Yehuda Amar Hada Osves LeChizkiya. We're going all the way back to the question on Chizkiya, because the question on Chizkiya was, if it's not worth a pruta, don't you have Chizkiya's solution? Because Chizkiya said you could just take money that you use to redeem other Meiser Sheni. There's an assumption that there's a little extra value left in that money, and you can use that money to redeem the Meiser Sheni that's not a pruta. So now we're saying we're answering that question of Chizkiya by combining the two cases of the Brisa. Hada Osves LeChizkiya Mereisha, that which you asked on Chizkiya from the beginning of the Brisa. That it said that if you have Meiser Sheni that's not a pruta, so there's no solution, and it's batal baro v'kasha loch liyavet kedechizkiya, and you're asking why not just do the solution of Chizkiya? Lo kash, it's not difficult, because chada katani, it's all one case. Ein bo shava pruta. The Meiser Sheni is not a pruta, and shenichnas li Yerushalayim v'yatz, it entered Yerushalayim and it left. The klitas mechitzos ma'akvos milchal lood. The point is, once it went within the walls, so now it's been gathered by the walls of Yerushalayim, and redemption is not possible. You can't even do that on most Rishonos. You can't even do that on money that you have previously that you used for another redemption of Meiser Sheni. That's not a solution because of the fact that it went into Yerushalayim, and that prevents redemption. That's what the Brisa means to say. And so that's what the Gemara says again. Rav Huna bar Yehuda says that Rav Shesha says, Chada Katani, it's all one case. Meiser Sheni she'ein bo shava pruta. It's Meiser Sheni that's not a pruta. Shenichnas li Yerushalayim v'yatz, it entered Yerushalayim and it left Yerushalayim. And the Gemara says, 1 second, Amai, but still, why? Why does that make any difference? Again, just bring it back into Yerushalayim, and then you'll be able to eat it. There is a solution. And the Gemara says to that, the nafel mechitzas, the case is the walls fell, so you can't bring it back into Yerushalayim and eat it. But the Gemara continues, v'nifrake, but why not just redeem it then? Ha'amar Rava said, mechitza lechol doraisa, that again, you have to have walls to eat it, that's a doraisa. But mechitza liklo derabanan, but the idea that the mechitzas gather it in and prevent you from redeeming it, that's only derabanan. V'chi gazu rabbanan, Rabbanan ki yisnu l'mechitzas, same as above. Maybe the Rabbanan only made the gezerah when there are walls. Ki lesnu l'mechitzas lo gaz Rabbanan. If there are no walls, then they didn't make the gezerah. And the Gemara says to that again, the same as before, lo plug Rabbanan, the Rabbanan don't make a distinction, and therefore, again, even if the walls fell down, we're going to say there's a problem with redeeming it in that situation because there are no walls. But the Gemara then continues, if so, my irya ein bo shava pruta. What difference does it make that it's not a shava pruta? Afilu yesh bo nami. Even if it was a pruta, this actually solves all the problems. You have a situation here where it went in within the walls then fall down, so now you can't eat the meiser sheni, you can't redeem the meiser sheni. What difference does it make whether it's not a shava pruta or it is a shava pruta? And the Gemara says to that, lo mi boy ka amar. What the Bryce is saying is not only this, but even that. Meaning, lo mi boy yesh bo, we don't even need to talk about a case where it's a shava pruta. The kalton le mechitzas, that's obvious that the walls gather it in and you're going to have a problem with redemption. Aval einbo, but let's say it wasn't a shava pruta, so then already emo lo kaltu le mechitzas, then maybe you'll say it's so insignificant that the walls don't gather it in that case, and then maybe redemption actually would be an option, and so we're saying no, Kamash Malan, the Bryce is teaching us that in this case as well, redemption is not an option. And Rashi explains, lo mi ba yeshba, we don't even need to say when it's worth a pruta, the kaven debar padiyahu, since it's something that can be redeemed, chayla olav klitas mechitzas derabanan, so the gathering in of the mechitzas on a derabanan level works, v'lo mefraksu, and it can't be redeemed anymore once there are no mechitzas. Aval einbo, but if it's not a shava pruta, so ema b'chi agavna lo ligzo rabanan klitas mechitzas. Maybe you will say that in that case the rabbanan never made the gezerah of the gathering in of mechitzas lifdiyah for the issue of redemption. The milsa de lo shchiachi lechalu al mos harishonos, because it's not common to redeem meiser sheni on original money with a little extra room left on that money. And therefore you would think maybe there is the solution of chizkiah, and that's what the Bryce is saying. Kamash Malon, the Bryce is teaching us you have no solution in this case. Again, in this case you have a situation, since it was within the walls of Yerushalayim, no redemption is possible. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Im gol yigal ish mi maisro, the pasuk talks about redeeming meiser sheni, and we darshan mi maisro v'lo kol maisro, we darshan from his meiser, but not all kinds of situations of meiser. Pradla meiser sheni she'en bo shava pruta, that excludes meiser sheni that's not worth a pruta, that cannot be redeemed. And the Gemara continues, Itmar was stated a machlokas amoroim on this issue. Rav Ami Omar ein bo, Rav Ami says that the meiser sheni itself is not a pruta, that's when it can't be redeemed. Rav Asi Omar ein bechum sho, Rav Asi says even if you have a situation where the 1/5, you have to add a fifth when you redeem meiser sheni, let's say the 1/5 is not worth a pruta, meaning to say the 1/5 of the meiser sheni, if that's not worth a pruta, that cannot be redeemed. And similar machlokas, Rav Yochanan Amar ein bo, Rav Yochanan says that the meiser sheni itself is not worth a pruta, that's when it cannot be redeemed. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar ein bechum sho. Again, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says even if the 5th isn't worth a pruta, that's enough to say that it cannot be redeemed. And Rashi explains, Pradla she'en bo shava pruta, again, we cannot redeem it if it's not a pruta. She'eno bechlal geula, that can't be redeemed. V'limedcha she'ena tofesas pruta. The point is that a pruta, it's not going to be able, you can't, let's say, take a pruta and you'll use an actual pruta to redeem meiser sheni that's less than a shava pruta, that won't work. And then we have a machlokas, what's not worth a pruta? Is it the meiser sheni itself or the 5th? Rashi explains, Rav Ami Amar ein bo shava pruta shenino, means it's not worth a pruta. Avalam yesh bo shava pruta bar geulu, as long as it's worth a pruta that's enough to redeem it, V'tofes pidyonu, the redemption will be effective. Ravasi Amar ein b'chum sho. Ravasi says that the chomesh, the 5th isn't a pruta, shava pruta, the 5th isn't a pruta, shaninu, that's what we mean to say over here. The lav bar geulu, what that would mean is it's not considered redeemable. Ad sheyeh bo shava arba prutos. The actual meiser sheni would then have to be 4 prutos, kadei sheyeh roy letosefes chomesh. That way you can add on the 5th, because if it's 4 prutos, then you're going to add on the 1/5 of 1 pruta. Again, that's the tosefes chomesh that's written in that pasuk, and so that's why it would have to be at least arba prutos in order to be redeemable. 1 pruta would not be enough according to Ravasi. And the Gemara continues, Meisva, we have a question from the following Bryce of Meiser Sheni she'en bo shava pruta. Again, you have Meiser Sheni that's not a pruta. Dayo sheyomar, it's enough that he says, Hu v'chum sho, this and its 5th, mechulal al mos harishonos. You can do a redemption on the earlier money. Again, this is like the solution of chizkiah. Take money that was already used to redeem Meiser Sheni. There'll be a little extra room in that money, and you can use that to redeem this Meiser Sheni and its 5th. But the Gemara is going to bring the proof from this language of dayo, it's enough. The Gemara says, says, Bishlama laman do amar ein b'chumsho. I understand, according to the one who says that the fifth is not a pruta. Hainu de katani dayo. It makes sense to say that it's enough. It means to say as follows. Tiavagav divididei ispe. What the brisa means is, even though the Meiser Sheni itself is a pruta, Kevon de v'chumshe leka, but since you have an issue with the fifth over here, that you don't have a pruta there, so shapir. So then it makes sense, this kind of language that you're going to say in this case, Meiser Sheni Shem Bo Shava Pruta, Dayo Sheyomar Hu v'chumsho. It's implying that we're focusing really on the chomesh, which is less than a pruta. But the Gemara says, Ela l'man damar ein bo, but according to the one who says that in order to not be redeemable, the actual Meiser Sheni has to be less than a pruta, and once the Meiser Sheni is more than a pruta, there's no problem at all. So my daya, what does it mean it's sufficient? You don't need to say that language. We're not even talking about the chomesh, we're talking about it itself being less than a pruta, and the Gemara says to that kasha, the Gemara says indeed, that would be difficult according to that man da'amar. And Rashi explains, Dayo Sheyomer, it's sufficient to say Kedechizkiah. First of all, we're doing the solution of Chizkiah, that we're taking the Mos HaRishonos and using that for redemption. We don't say Yamtanat Sheyalenu Yerushalayim, you have to wait to take it up to Yerushalayim, or Yamtanat Sheyitzrefenu Emacher, you have to try to combine it with some other Meiser Sheni. Dekevan Devechum Sheilek a Pruta, Lo Kachashev, since the fifth does not have a Pruta that's not important, V'dayo Bekach, it's sufficient to just use Chizkiah solution of the Mos HaRishonos. And so the Gemara then asks, well, El Laman Damar Ein Bo, but if you're going to say that it itself is not a pruta, so my daya, what do you mean it's sufficient? Meaning my ribuse, what's the added chiddush over here? The itzrach lemisni dayo, we have to say it's sufficient. Listening, it should simply say, Omer hu v'chumsho, that he says it and its chomesh are going to go on the Mos HaRishonos. It's a simple case of Mos HaRishonos. The implication over here is that really it is worth a pruta, and it's just the chomesh that is not worth a pruta, and so therefore you might think that in such a situation you're not allowed to use this Mos HaRishonos solution, and so it's saying dayo, in this case, you can use the Mos HaRishonos solution because the chomesh is less than a pruta, and again the Gemara indeed says it's a question on the other man da'amar. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, Chumsha milagav or Chumsha milavar. How do we calculate the 1/5 by Meiser Sheni? Is it from the inside or is it from the outside? Rashi explains, Chumsha milagav means al shava esrim zuz. Let's say, for example, you have Meiser Sheni worth 20 zuz, so Mosef Arba, so you take 1/5 of 20, which is 4, and you add 4. That's the normal way we would add 1/5 to 20. Shein Chumsha shel keren. It's essentially the fifth of the principal of the 20. The other way to calculate the fifth is o Chumsha milavar. You do the chomesh from the outside. What that would mean is al arbo revoim, on 4 quarters Mosef hachamishes, you add on the fifth min hachutz from the outside. The havelula esrim zuz chamisha zuz. What that would mean is that for 20 zuz you're actually adding on 5 zuz. It would mean to say as follows: if you have 20 zuz and you add 5 zuz, the total is 25 zuz, and 1/5 of 25 is 5. So you're adding 1/5 after you have the total. When you add 1/5 after you have the total, it's actually the equivalent of adding 1/4. If you added 1/4 to 20 zuz, that would be adding 5 zuz. So chumsha milavar is the equivalent of 1/4, the way we would calculate from the principle. In any case, that's the Gemara's question. How do you calculate the fifth? And the Gemara says, Amar Ravina, Ravina says, Tashma, come in here, the following proof. The Brisa says, Habaylim omrim be'esrim. Let's say the owners, they want to redeem their own hektish for 20. V'chol adam be'esrim. And then other people also, that everyone's competing to redeem this particular hektish, and someone else offers 20. So Habaylim kodman, the owners come first, Memnesha Mosif and Chomesh, because they add a fifth, and therefore it's a benefit for hektish to have the owners do it. Now, Amar Echad Hareolai be'esrim v'yechad. Now, let's say a person says, I'm willing to redeem it for 21, and the owners really wanted to just redeem it for 20. But again, the owners were going to be adding on the fifth. Rashi here explains, a person made something hektish, now he's redeeming his hektish, and that's where we learn this in the Mishnah, Meseches. The owners come first because they add a fifth. So when they say 20, they're really saying 25. Because other people are not going to add a fifth. Now Rashi over here, by saying from 20 it goes up to 25, is obviously calculating milavar, is calculating from the outside. That's why 1/5 is not going to be adding 4. It's not going to be 24. It's going to be 25 because 1/5 of 25 is 5. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph.